and come into a seated posture. Find some comfort in your seated posture. And maybe you want to lie down, it's all good. Um, and let's just imagine, as we start to see the light at the end of the tunnel, and of course, we don't want to jump ahead. We're not, let's not be too, put the cart before the horse, right? But this vision of coming back together as a community is a really beautiful thing to hold. So instead of just thinking, oh, I miss this and I miss this and I miss this and I miss this person, let's take a moment to envision a social environment. Maybe it's a yoga class, maybe it's a family gathering, maybe it's playing volleyball in the park, maybe it's whatever it is. It doesn't matter what it is. Something that really feeds you from a social perspective. So as you close your eyes, let's just imagine, what is the sound of a group of people gathering together? What does it sound like to hear laughter, multiple people's laughter, not just one person's laughter, but multiple people's laughter? What does it feel like to have face to face communication instead of computer communication? As you visualize this, what's different? Just hearing my voice come through your computer screen, what's different when you are in person with someone? What are we missing? Of course, we're gaining so much. Thank goodness for Zooms. Thank goodness for FaceTime. But what is missing? And can you envision the feeling of it? And can you know that there's a part of our social being selves that needs this, even though we've adapted and learned to cope? Can you let a little bit of your vulnerability shine through to know that this is a human need? So it's kind of like a sankalpa, something that is born from the heart that you have to envision before it arrives. Let's envision some normalcy coming back into our lives in the small and big ways. Take a deep breath and feel the experience of your body. Let's turn this vision into an image that, not an image, but a, a memory you have of being in a yoga class. What does it feel like to be in community in your yoga practice? What are the gifts of Zoom? There's many. And what are the gifts of a Sangha? Take a deep breath. Melt the shoulders, relax the body. Place your hands together at your heart and bow in. All right, and let's release our hands and come onto your back. All right, so find your way. Of course, yoga is such a personal practice, so that can be found anywhere. Let's find our way into our bodies here. So as you find your way onto the floor, can you feel the release of your joints? Finding some space. How does your spine feel on the ground? Let's take some deep breaths. If you were here on Wednesday, did a lot of work with the breath. What does it feel like to have that sense of expansion through the ribs? The diaphragm moving, feeling how the body conspires for breath. And then let's stretch the arms overhead. Check in with your shoulders. How are they today? How's your range of motion? Are you able to bring your arms overhead easily, or do you have to modify something? All right, let's stretch the left and right sides independently of each other. Just feel that side body extension. There's so many ways to open the spine and open the chest. That doesn't necessarily have to be a really deep back bend. And always when we find an open heart, something is gained. All right, so let's start a little bit with that. Walk your legs over to the left, and then walk your torso over to the left. And you might need to adjust what your right arm is doing for some comfort, but see if you can find that full side body from your heel to your fingers, kind of creating a little C shape or a banana shape in your body. Notice if your hip wants to leave, your right hip wants to leave, your right shoulder wants to leave the floor. And then come back to center and let's go the other way. So walk feet over to right. And you don't, as always, you don't have to go to your end point. You can find sensation anywhere along the way. And then stretch through the left side. And notice if you have difference in your two sides. If you feel like, oh yeah, my body moves well side bending here, but maybe not so well on the other side, or vice versa. What are you feeling? Can you feel it all the way down through your leg, your hip, your side body, your ribs, your shoulder? And then come back to center. Bring your knees into your chest now. Rock a little bit from side to side. Okay. Swaying, releasing the spine. And let's circle the knees a few times. Go one direction. We do this every warm-up. So do you always go the same direction? Part of our learning to bushwhack through our bodies that aren't traveled well, maybe try spinning your knees the other direction first sometimes. All right, let's open up the hips, bring your knees away from each other and back in. Notice what the pelvis wants to do in relation to the hip joints. Are you finding a very static pelvis, or are you feeling your pelvis move a little bit on the floor into an anterior and posterior tilt as you play with the openness of your hip joints? Great, and then right knee into the chest. Stretch your left leg long on the floor and wiggle around your feet. Ankles roll, whatever feels good. And then change sides. Left knee and right leg long on the floor. Deep breaths. All right, let's go ahead and internally rotate our legs here. So take your legs a little bit wider, feet hip width apart maybe, and internally rotate your legs. And put your hands on your ASIS, your hip bones that stick out in the front. Put your hands there and then walk them down a few inches. And as you internally rotate and then externally rotate, can you feel that muscle kind of lump up when you internally rotate your thighs? This is your TFL. This is a very strong internal rotator of your legs. And it's useful. Well, it's always useful, but it's the muscle that is the muscle of the IT band track. So the IT band is your fascial sheath that is like the tendon of this muscle. It has more to do than that, but that's one of it. So a lot of times we can get tight right in here. So just go back and forth. Feel that muscle flex underneath your fingers and then release as you externally rotate. And because the psoas muscle that we're going to work with today tends to, it's a hip flexor. So when we stretch it, that internal rotation can actually help stretch the psoas muscle. Where our psoas, when we flex it, we tend to turn our legs out. That's part of the psoas action, is external rotation at the hip. So when we internally rotate our thighs, it has an extra little bit of stretching the psoas. So we're going to work that a little bit later in our practice. So I just wanted you to feel how the TFL and the psoas kind of are antagonistic to each other, even though they're both hip flexors. So our body has such cool capacity to do so many things. Stretch your body out to a starfish. Open up your limbs. Exhale and draw your knees into your chest. Head up. Feel that sense of openness in your spine. Couple of more times, spreading out your limbs. Exhale, drawing your knees in, chest in, head up. One more time, big breath in, expand your body out. As you exhale, draw your body in. Let's find our way onto our side and come up onto your hands and your knees. One of the things I miss about being in community with you all in person, besides just being with you, is being able to watch you practice. So, it's as a teacher, I miss being able to see what cues that I give, what lands, what doesn't land, what lands. So, it's hard sometimes. So I'm hoping that what I say is getting in there. All right, so let's start moving into some cat-cows, feeling that sense of full movement in the spine. And feel free to swivel about. All right, one of the beautiful things about the ways our nervous system and our muscles work is that we don't just work mechanically. We don't have flexion, extension, flexion, extension. We have such a symphony of possible movement patterns that join different muscles with different actions simultaneously. So as you swirl around your spine, have some deep gratitude for what it takes to do that in your nervous system. How many different muscles groups have to work in perfect harmony, and we don't even have to think about it. All right, so enjoy how your body works. And then when you're ready, let's go ahead and curl the toes under and lift all the way up to dog pose. Spread out your hands, spread out your feet. And let's find our way. Maybe you want to pedal your feet. Maybe you want to pick one foot up off the ground and put it back down. Just see what feels good to awaken the fullness of your body. Dog pose is such a great pose to feel a full stretch. Relax your skull. Let the exhales come. Remember that gravity is helping your exhales a whole lot. See if you have even weight in your 4 points of each hand. Can you hug your hands toward each other and feel that stability that comes through your torso, kind of in your side ribs? Feel the femur bones lift up, 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 and back. And then come back down into child's pose. Take your hips anterior tilt pelvis. Lift and widen the sit bones so you get a deep flexion in your hip joints. Walk the hands out in front of you. Side bend again. So opening up the side body as you walk your hands over to one side. Release the head. Soften the skull. Find some deep breaths here. Settle your hips toward the heels. And don't worry, if your knee or hip just don't allow you to deeply flex, just go wherever you go. You might be way forward with your arms so that your knees don't have to bend so much. Just find where your body can go today. Walk your hands over to the other side. Soften your skull. Try not to take tension anywhere it doesn't need to be. Especially if you tend to be a top breather, if you use your neck and shoulders a lot for your breathing, keep mindful of allowing the diaphragm to be your workhorse. Come back up onto all fours. Back to dog pose you go. Extending through the spine again. Hug on to your hands. Bring them into the earth and toward each other. And let's bend our elbows some and swoop the elbows under so that you're kind of turning the eyes of the elbows slightly up. And then extend again. Can you feel the work in your torso, your lats, your serratus? A lot of muscles supporting this so your shoulders are not slack. You don't have the sense of leaning into the shoulder joints. Okay, let's walk our feet forward. Come into Uttanasana. Fold, let your knees bend. Let the tailbone tip up. The sacrum follows the spine like a waterfall. Release your skull. Deep breathing. Inhale for a halfway lift. Enjoy the openness in the back of the legs. Feel it all the way to your feet. Spread open the bones of the feet. See if you can get all that fascia on your feet to broaden and stretch. Send your heels down, your toes down. Lift your arches up. Lift your femur bones up into the hip joints. Take the heads of the thigh bones back and feel a little bit of width in your sit bones. Let the tailbone lift. It's okay to have your knees really bent. And then fold and allow your knees to for sure bend. Push off your feet, rise all the way up, bringing your arms to the sky. And you decide, how are your shoulders today? Can you have your arms overhead, or is this difficult? And if so, are you bringing them forward in front of you? What kind of change of position are you doing to accommodate any difficulty you're having? Open the thoracic spine. Try to be kind to the lumbar spine. Try not to let the lumbar spine do the work of moving your body back. See if you can feel the stability using your core and open the thoracic spine. And then release your arms, shake out your arms, and let's spin from side to side here a little bit. What I love about this, besides the fact that it's just a nice loose twist, is that it really starts to warm up where your rib cage and your spine attach to each other in the back of your body. So see if you can feel into those places, get some, motion in there. Breathe deeply. Let your chest expand as well. All right, and then release. Shake out your hands, loosen your arms. Lift your arms up to the sky. Exhale and fold forward. Inhale for a halfway lift. And then release back down. Come to a lunge, right foot forward, left foot back. Okay, so as we find this posture, let's start, of course, when we move here, we start to feel the hamstrings, but let's focus on the hip flexors of that back leg. Bring your awareness there. Inner spiral the thigh a little bit. Lift the femur bone. Try not to compress the knee. Widen the sit bones. Feel the extension of your crown reaching forward. So there's space in your lumbar spine instead of sinking the hip down. See if you can feel into the hip joint itself where the femur bone attaches to the pelvis. Can you lift that femur bone up so that there's less strain in that joint? When you're ready, rise up, come into crescent lunge. Once again, arms can be anywhere you want. Maybe try, if your body is able to, cactusing open your arms today so you can feel those subscap muscles stretch open. Feel the breath. If your ribs like to pop forward, what can you do to integrate? Maybe your back knee needs to bend a little bit. Okay, and then release. Come forward. Bring your forearms to touch. And then stretch your arms forward and lean forward, your whole body. Arms overhead if you can handle it. If that's too much, arms come back. Find your breath. All right, and bring your hands back down onto the ground. Walk your back foot forward. Fold in half. Inhale, hands on blocks. If you have two blocks, feel the extension in your legs, in the spine. Remember, this axial extension, the spaciousness of our vertebrae, we want to find this before any other movement, before back bending, before forward bending, before lateral bending, before twisting. If we can feel the length of our spine, we're a little bit more apt to go safely where we want to go. Release, come back down, step your right foot back. Lunging on this side. Open heart. Finding your breath. How does that back knee feel? Is it compressed at all? Do you need to bend it? Can you work with the femur bone, not just by shooting the knee up toward the sky? Where's your stability coming from? Can you press the front heel into the ground to make sure that your glutes on your front leg, your inner thighs, your hamstring are activated so that you're stabilizing, not just leaning? Okay. Notice if your pelvis wants to drop on that, well, both sides really, but especially on the right side. Lift the femur bone, widen the sit bones. Feel the spine grow. Axial extension. And when you're ready, come on up. What happens to your spine when you come upright? Do you kind of sit down on your pelvis? See if you can rise up off of your pelvis a little bit. Check in with the back knee. Sometimes I bend that back knee a lot. It helps me to neutralize my pelvis and keep my floating ribs in. And it also helps me prevent that hip from kind of pushing forward in the hip joint. So see what's available for your body. Where do you want your arms to be? Are you an upward person today? Are you a straight out? Maybe you want to press your hands to the walls or do some wrist spins, maybe some finger curls. Just find what's available for you. Press your front heel into the ground. Activate your glutes and your hamstring. All right, and then when you're ready, cactus open your arms wherever you were before. Open the chest. And then release and bring your forearms to touch. Stretch your spine, lower down toward your leg, arms out in front of you again. If you can't, arms back. Actually, let's all take our arms back for this variation. Just see what the difference feels like. Can you feel the back muscles engage? Okay, and then release your hands down onto the floor. Step back, dog pose. One more time, spine is growing. Hug your forearms and hands to the midline. Come forward into a plank. Okay, so breathe here. Find that integrity of your center body. What does it feel like to have a sense of stability, but the breath is still coming? Inner spiral your thighs just a bit. We don't want to turn our knees in, but we want to have our sit bones widen. What does the axial extension feel like now? Okay, and put your knees down. How are you breathing? Let's lower ourselves to the floor. Okay. Keeping down onto the ground. So we're not going to lift up just yet. Take your hands off the ground. Okay, just hover, like a little hovercraft right off the floor. And pull your elbows down a little bit toward your pelvis. And see what it feels like to feel the bottom edge of your shoulder blades move toward the lumbar spine, like a little V shape. Breathe into the strength of the back of your body. Sometimes we over-rely on our upper traps for everything, and let's activate the lower traps. And then release. Melt that down. Find your way into cobra pose. Breathing well. And then release and melt back down. Okay, let's do this on our side first. We're going to do it a few different directions, but come onto your right side. We're going to grab the left knee. Hold on. No, don't grab the knee. Bend the knee. Grab onto the left ankle. And then we're going to stretch that leg back to stretch your quadricep muscle. Find your breath. So besides the psoas muscle and the TFL, that little lumpy one you were feeling earlier, one of your quadricep muscles crosses over the hip joint and onto the pelvis. So it's also a hip flexor. So let's just enjoy stretching our quads, tailbone moving toward the knee, pubic bone lifting up toward the navel. Try not to let the knee lift in the air. Try not to externally rotate your leg. Keep your knee in line with your hip. Okay, and then release and relax. Let's roll over onto our left side. You can bend your knees to begin. That's a lot more stable if you have your knees bent and then you reach back and grab your foot than if your left leg is straight on the ground. So you can take some of the balance piece away from it so you really can focus on the stretch of your quadricep. Tailbone moves toward the knee. Pubic bone lifts up toward navel. Keep the knee in line with your hip and see if you can reach the knee away from the pelvis. Reach the crown. So remembering that axial extension again. If you have just an ever so slight internal rotation, it can help the psoas have a little extra stretch in there. And then release and relax. Come back onto your belly, come up onto all fours. Have some movement of the spine, whatever feels good. Take your forearms onto the earth. Go ahead and curl the toes under and lift up into dolphin pose. This is my homage to the dolphins that I just saw last week. Okay, so lift your heart up toward the pelvis. Feel the extension. Breathe, relax your neck. Hug the forearms toward each other. See what's working in your back body. Are you activating some unusual muscles? Feel the femur bones lift up, sit bones widen. Find the axial extension now. All right, then let's walk our feet back. Come into a forearm plank. Drop your hips so they're in line with your shoulders. Lift the chest. Find the crown tail now. Find your breath. Deep inhales, deep exhales. Hopefully we're finding a lot of core stability and back body strength. And then go ahead and put your knees down onto the ground so you can come up onto your hands and then find your way to dog pose. Breathing well. Inhale, lift your right leg up in the air. Stack open right hip over left hip as best as you can and perhaps bend the knee. Find your breath. Lift your left hip up and back. Try not to sink into your left armpit. Square up the hips again. Take a deep breath in. Exhale, knee to nose. Inhale, bring that leg back. Exhale, and bring your foot forward. Come to a lunge here. Plant the back heel down onto the ground. Rise up. Bring your hands onto your hips. If you want, bring your arms up. Virabhadrasana 1 in any variation with your upper body that feels good for you. So, of course, we're not going to have our hips parallel to the front of the mat when our back heel is down, but to work in that direction, hug the foot, the back foot toward the midline. See what you can do to start turning that hip a little bit more. Draw the front knee back into the hip. Lean forward now, whichever you're doing with your arms, and feel that axial extension. Find your breath. Bring your hands down onto blocks. Come up. Find your way. A little bit of internal rotation in your thighs. Can you feel those muscles kick in your glutes, your hamstrings, everything in the back, but also on the standing leg? Can you feel the hip muscles? Extend the spine. How is your breathing? How's the axial extension? Let's go ahead and stretch our foot down. Now join with the other foot. Inhale for a halfway lift. Exhale and melt back down. Take your feet a little bit wider and ever so slightly find the hugging of your feet into the floor and pulling them wide. So we're activating the outer hip muscles, the gluteus medius and minimus. And then release and melt. Step back to a lunge with your left foot forward. Plant your back heel on the ground. Virabhadrasana 1 on this side. See what's available. So as you come into the pose, maybe you need your foot out to the side more. Maybe you need your arms down. Maybe you need your arms somewhere else. Okay, so find what's available. If you find that your pelvis is turned a whole lot toward the right, hug your foot, your right foot, down into the ground and toward the midline so that you activate a little bit of capacity to turn your hip. Find your breath. With your left knee, draw it back into the hip joint. Extend the spine. Try not to dump into the low back. Feel the spinal extension. Press your front heel into the ground so you're feeling like you're working with your back leg too, your glutes and your hamstring, not just your quad. And then release your hands, hop up. Blocks underneath your hands can be very helpful. Straighten that leg. Try not to lift the hips. See what it feels like to have an internal rotation. Feel the extension of your spine again. Breathe well here. All right, now we're going to step all the way back with that foot. Hands onto the ground. Lift your left leg high in the air. Find the breath. Stack your hip over the other hip. Extend through the side body, the pelvis. Bend your knee if you want. Stretching that iliacus muscle. Try not to let the right side of your body collapse. Lift under the armpit, lift the femur bone. And then square up the hips. Place that foot down onto the ground. Isometrically pull your feet apart. Wake up those muscles in your hips. Come forward into a plank. Hold steady. Finding breath. Finding spine. And let's come down onto the ground safely. So knees first is sometimes a really nice thing to do. Let's take our arms a little higher off the ground. We're still with our hands. So fingertips like in line with your nipples. They can be a little bit more forward if you want. Bring the shoulder blades tips down toward the lumbar spine. Inhale and lift up. Counteract that deep strength in the back body with some core. Exhale and melt and release back down. Come up onto your hands and your knees. Release that from the spine. So swirl around your body. What feels good in that back body? Anterior tilt the pelvis. Come back into child's pose. Settle the hips back, relax your head. Okay, we're gonna come forward into a lunge with our right foot forward. Not everybody's gonna be able to do this, so if you need to stand up, I'll give you a plan B. I can't do this, my knee hurts too much for this today. So plan B is to stand up like this. I'm gonna show you with my other leg so that you know what the first version of the pose is to come into a lunge. So for you, you're gonna have your right foot forward, your left hand on the mat, and we're gonna reach back with our right hand and grab our right foot, opening up. Hug to the midline with your shoulder blade and your knee. Bring them toward each other. If your kneecap doesn't like this, make sure you're forward, like on your thigh, instead of smack on your kneecap. You can put a blanket underneath your knee. If your knee bothers you like mine does, then you can stand up and you can just come, you can hold on to something if you want, and you can come into a quad stretch. Okay? Stretch your knee down. The joy of having your knee on the floor and lunging is that not only are your quadriceps stretching, but your hip flexors are stretching too. So we get to pick two flowers with one hand. All right, great. And then release from that posture. Come back up onto all fours and let's switch sides. So now our left foot is going to be forward. Our right knee is back. Support underneath it with a blanket. Stand up and do a different posture. Find your way. So you can use a strap around your foot. You know, when you're coming into this pose, sometimes you're like, oh, I can't reach my foot. Sometimes you can grab your pants. Sometimes you can wrap a strap around your foot. So whatever's available. I know this is a very deep stretch and not everybody's thighs will go here. So modify in whatever way you need. Find the spinal extension. As you find that little twist that's embedded in this posture, shoulder blade and knee find each other. Lean forward on your thigh a little bit more than your kneecap. Try not to collapse into the lumbar spine. Okay. Release out of the pose and find dog pose. So you can always be on all fours instead if you're like trying to get rid of some dog poses out of your practice to lessen the number of repetitions. There's always a plan B for everything, okay? But whatever you're doing, let it be symmetrical, whether you're just standing or coming into Uttanasana or dog pose. Find symmetry in your body. Breathing well. All right, let's go ahead and walk our feet forward. Come into Uttanasana. I know this is a subtle thing, but we're gonna just work with it a little bit today. Stand on your right foot, and we're gonna bring our left leg out in front of us, straight leg. So your heel can be very close to the floor. You can bring your leg higher, anywhere in between. So try not, if you're gonna bring your leg higher, don't let your ego be in charge, because a lot of times when we try to bring our leg higher, we end up doing this, we round our spine. So bring your leg into a place where you can still find that spinal extension and stabilize yourself with your core. Everybody, put your hand on that little spot on the front of your hip. Internally rotate your leg. Can you feel that little muscle pop, pop up? A little contraction of that muscle there. To see what it feels like to internally rotate your thigh. And then come back to neutral. And then go ahead and release. Bring your feet hip width apart or knees together. Rise up. Exhale, knees down, arms back. We will do the other side. Let's first find a little bit of a chair pose. Finding those same muscles. Notice if one side's a little bit more awake than the other. So we're not internally rotating, but as you widen your sit bones, your femur bones will want to internally rotate. So we're in a hip flexion, so those TFL muscles right here are going to work. At least you want them to work. Okay. All right, stand up straight again. Let's lift your right leg. Okay, so always be mindful of your standing leg. We're not throwing the knee back. We're not sticking the hip out. We're not lifting any higher than our butt. So I'm going pretty low so that I can keep the extension of my spine, which is way more important than your leg height. Internally rotate your thigh a little bit. You might notice, like I do, that you have one side that's a lot stronger than another side. So this is normal. We all have patterns in the body. So this is a slight, we're not way turning our toes in, which is going to make our hip pop out. See what you can do to stabilize through your pelvis and only let your femur bone turn. All right, and then release that. 2 feet onto the ground, rise up. One more time, chair pose. If you want to have your arms back, if you want to have your arms forward, you can, if your arms are up, focus on those shoulder blades. Focus on the spinal extension. Draw the femur bones back, a little wide sit bones. And then rise up. Separate your feet hip width apart. We're going to repeat a chair pose. This time, put your hands on your outer knees and pull your feet apart and your knees apart. So your gluteus medius and your gluteus minimus right here on the outside of your buttocks and your hip will activate, so will your TFL. Let these muscles come alive. Breathing well. And then rise back up, open the chest, step your left foot back. One more time, let's come into a lunge. So the back heel's up off the ground, rise up with your arms. Feel the hip flexors stretch now after all that flexion. Go ahead and reach your arms back now, palms facing the floor, triceps engaged, back body engages, spine is long. Wide sit bones, lift the femur bone. Okay, rise up again. Let's turn this into a twist. Maybe the elbow comes to the outer knee, palms can be together, hand on the shoulder, maybe hand comes to the floor. Whatever variation of the twist you're doing, lift the femur bone. Internally rotate the thighs just a little bit. So just focus on the sit bones widening. This will help you with that inner spiral. Spinal extension. How's the breath? Remember, your breath comes from the turning, or your twist comes from the exhale and the turning of your obliques. And release the hands down onto the ground to put your knee on the floor. Okay. Feel the psoas stretch. Once you have recovered from your twist, come up, place your hands on your knees, and just feel this is one of the most basic ways for us to stretch our hip flexors. Can you drop the tailbone, lift the pubic bone? Can you widen the sit bones? And then release and melt back down. Bring yourself back onto all fours, anterior tilt the pelvis, and just release back into some hip flexion. So, going into the reverse pattern, just flexing your hips for a moment in child's pose. And then when we're ready, we're going to come back to the other side. So come back up onto your hands and your knees. And this time we'll bring our left leg forward. Lift your back knee up off the ground, finding a lunge. Remember that you don't have to go super deep in your knee bend, but have your foot press into the floor, especially here, so you turn on your hamstring and glutes. Feel the spinal extension. Place your arms and shoulders, what's best for you, what's giving you breath, what's giving your shoulders, your chest some openness. And then we're gonna lean forward, bring your hands to face the ground, triceps engage, heads of the arm bones lift up, feel those points of your shoulder blades root to the low back, core is engaged, press the heel, find your breath, and then let's come up again and find any variation of the twist that worked for your body. So as you come into this pose, depth is not the most important thing. Breath is the most important thing. Remember, we do not want our arm leverage to take us to the twist. We want our exhales and our obliques to twist us. Remember that spinal extension. Keep lifting your back thigh and widening the sit bones. Find the long spine, find the breath. Great, and then release the hands down onto the ground. Last dog pose, come into that sense of space and symmetry and balance. Deep breaths. Come forward into a plank. And hold yourself steady. And then I always put my knees down first. You don't have to, but if you have any sort of shoulder trouble, it's a great way to support. When you bend your elbows and come down, try not to let the shoulders fall. Let them come down last. And now we're going to find a complete back bend here. So lift your kneecaps off the floor. Take your legs a little wider. Decide whether you want your arms down, out, or up overhead. What's best for your spine? What's best for your shoulders? And then lift everything up. Can you move the shoulder blades toward the lumbar spine? Can you integrate the ribs and the core? Can you use those outer hip muscles? Breathe deeply. Slightly internally rotate your legs. Feel those hip flexors now turn into internal rotators. And then release and melt. Turn your head one side or the other and windshield wiper your knees. All right, come back onto your back. And as we find bridge pose, see what it feels like. So we're going to work with a few things here. I want you to open your chest as much as you want to. So climbing onto the tops of the shoulders, doing your chest thing, but also working with anchoring your feet well so that you're engaging a lot of muscles. It's very easy when we go into a back bending posture of any kind that we overdo our glutes. We just want to lift with our glutes, which of course, those are strong muscles of extension, so we will use them, but we don't want to use them in isolation. So as you start to lift the pelvis, see what it feels like to have a slight feeling of pigeon-toedness, just a little bit, and see if you can activate the inner feet. See if you can activate the outer feet. See if you can feel that sense of a slight inner spiral of your thighs. Rock onto the tops of the shoulders, spinal extension. Try not to compress the neck. All 4 points of your feet, toes, big toes, little toes, inner heels, outer heels. All right, and then release and melt back down. So here's another example of being in Sangha and community together. If we were in class, I could see what everybody's doing. But if you feel strong and able to do a full back bend here, a wheel pose, Urdhva Dhanurasana, then by all means, go for it. Now, you guys have been my students for a long time, many of you. So if you want to practice the blocks on a ramp, you know, with your hands on blocks, you can do it that way. If you want to not do it at all, that's totally choice, and we're just going to repeat a bridge pose. Or you can flip over onto your belly and do Dhanurasana instead of Urdhva Dhanurasana. So whatever you're going to choose to do, remember, this is a big pose. So there's a few things. I'll cue this one, but you go do what you're going to do. Elbows come toward each other and plug down into the earth. So we're stable in our shoulders. The feet are placed just like in that bridge pose we just had. We're going to come up onto the top of the head and redo the elbows. Elbows in, elbows to shoulders. When you lift up, can you find not only the extension of your spine, that axial extension, but can you slightly internally rotate your thighs? Let the TFL muscles help the psoas open. Breathe into the extension. The whole front body is long. No matter what you're doing, the front body is long and big arch. Find your breath. Tips of your shoulder blades toward the lumbar spine. Open the belly and chest. Come out of there however you see fit. Whatever pose you ended up in, time to come out. Deep breaths. Rest on your back for a moment. If you are on your belly in Dhanurasana, flip over onto your back. Instead of pulling your knees right up toward your chest, which you probably want to do, let's first just windshield wiper our knees left and right. Okay, so find that sense of going side to side, loosening the back up a little bit, releasing, breathing. Okay, we're going to now bend your knees, feet planted on the floor. Cross your elbows one over the other and hold the outer shoulders with your hands. Just take a moment to relax the shoulders. Find your breath. And then we're going to switch Put the other elbow on top. Find your breathing. And then release the arms. Wrap your fingers around your right knee. Left leg is either long on the floor or bend your left knee to be on the floor. Stretch through your spine, that axial extension. We do it before anything else. When you're ready, interlace your hands behind your hamstring. And you can be right behind your knee or further up toward your hip. Make sure your knee is not hyperextended. Flex your toes, lift your heel. We're going to cross. So either way, with your left leg straight or your left knee bent, foot on the floor, we're going to cross the right leg over past the midline. Spinal extension. Deep breaths. All right, and then come back up. Bring the knee, compress it in, and then switch sides. Either right foot is on the floor or right leg is on the floor. Left knee into the chest. And then we're going to interlace the opposite way. So put your fingers the weird way and hold on behind your left leg. By your knee, higher than your knee, wherever you want to go. We're not hyperextending our knee. Root the hip down. Take the femur bone back. Feel the hamstrings move into the hands. Spinal extension. Finding your breath. Flex your toes. Lift your heel. And as you're ready, cross the leg over the midline, regardless of what your right leg is doing, whether it's on the ground or knee is bent. Okay, great. And then relax and put two feet on the ground. Either reverse pigeon or right thigh over left thigh. So either right foot on left knee or right thigh over left thigh, knees toward chest. Spinal extension. It's easy when we're on the ground to let gravity help us with spinal extension. So feel those vertebrae come into some spaciousness. How's your breath? Do you like moving in this pose? Do you like stillness in this pose? And then relax and change sides. So either left knee on right or left foot on right knee, or cross left thigh over right thigh. Draw knees to chest. So whichever way you like to stretch your hip, whatever's best for you. Choose a hand position where it's most comfortable, either behind your thigh, the shin, or one hand on your shin and one hand on your knee. If you're in reverse pigeon pose, if you're thigh over thigh, you can hold on to the knees, or you can walk your hands down your shins to your ankles, or maybe even to your feet. Different explorations will give you different sensations. Breathing into the spinal extension. Try not to round the spine and curl. Still wide sit bones. Okay, and then relax your feet on the floor. Lift your hips and scooch them to the right. Knees up and drop them left. Enjoy a twist. Breathe here. And then bring your knees up. Flatten out your stance. Take a breath. And then scooch to the other side. Hips go left, knees up toward chest, and drop right. You can always put a block underneath your shins to lessen the depth of the twist. And then inhale. Put your feet on the ground, neutral spine, and then decide what's your body needing for the last minute. Okay, do you want a happy baby pose? Do you want some rocking around or a rocking plow? Are you ready for Shavasana? Do you want to just lie down? Do you want a child's pose? Do you feel like you need a little bit of pelvic movement from anterior and posterior rocking? Do you want a cat cow with some spinal swirling? What's your body needing? And then as you find yourself ready, Shavasana is available at any moment and anything you need. So do you want a bolster or some blankets underneath your knees today? Would you rather be flat? Does your head like a little support? Do your shoulders need a little support? Sometimes after some back bending, it's nice to plop a little blanket underneath each shoulder to kind of help your shoulders passively round after opening. Whatever's working for you. Get comfy. And then let your spine find that spinal extension, that axial extension one more time. Let gravity help you. Spread your vertebrae out. Let your limbs get heavy. Breathe deeply. Maybe you want your knees up on a chair or your calves up on a chair. So really explore, how is my spine going to feel best? How about my hips? How is your breath best? And allow yourself to move deeply into the posture. Let your head rest. Let your face soften. Soften your belly. Let your spine rest on the floor. And come into deep belly breathing. Let's begin to deepen our breathing. Feel your weight on the floor. Have deep connection with resting your body, resting your mind. Let's begin to find movement. I know it's a nice shavasana for most of you, and the little boxes I see on the side of my screen, nobody's moving. There's a little bit of movement. Start to feel yourself eventually coming over onto your side. And of course, one of the joys of doing yoga by yourself is you can completely ignore me and lie there for 20 more minutes if you want to. And by the way, you can do that in class in person too. But if you're ready to sit up, find your way to a seated posture that's comfortable. Soften your eyes, deepen your breath. Let's offer our practice. Share your energy. The people you were thinking of earlier when you were envisioning a gathering of people in your life, who are those people? Are they your family? Are they your friends? See if you can send your energy to that gathering. And to anyone else you want to offer your love to. Namaste. Thank you, everyone. I hope you have a wonderful day. The weather's so beautiful.